Welcome to Built on Faith Homestead or Leaving Egypt, depending on which video platform you like to watch your content on. My name is Justin, and in today's video we're going to be discussing this red meat allergy that is apparently tick-borne, and it's on the rise in the United States. There's a whole bunch of people that are now all of a sudden allergic to eating red meat. I myself know several people that used to be able to eat things like cheeseburgers or lamb or goat or steaks or any of those types of things. They were just fine, but now all of a sudden they break out in hives and they get very sick. Their doctors have told them this is what's happened to them. They've gotten bitten by a tick, and now they have this red meat allergy. Now, I'm sure it's just coincidence that this is on the rise in a exponential way. I'm sure it's just a coincidence it's occurring about the same time people like the UN are saying that we have global boiling, and one of the things that John Kerry said was that agriculture is at least a third of the global warming problem by the emissions that are produced with agriculture, and one of the primary things he hit on was methane emissions. And when they talk about methane emissions, they're talking about your cows and any other red meat animals that are farmed and raised in such a way that we may be able to eat them, right? Mass produced in a large way, right? All these things, that's what they are attacking. Is when they say we need less methane, that equals we need less red meat on the planet. I'm sure it's just coincidence that all of that is occurring at the same time. It just so happens if you can get a whole bunch of people allergic to red meat and they have to quit eating red meat, well, that's just good for the global environment. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. However, I would like to discuss this red meat allergy, because quite honestly and quite seriously, all joking aside, people have been eating red meat a long time. Why are we allergic to it now?
I once was lost, oh, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see.
All right, so I must confess to you, I have an outline wrote out because it's too much information for my small little brain to keep track of, but we dove into this just a little bit. This specifically is called alpha-gal, alpha-gal syndrome, alpha-gal syndrome. This is what they are telling people they have whenever they have this red meat allergy. What is alpha-gal? Well, it is a carbohydrate found in mammals, found in all mammals except for us as humans. And it's always been found in animals. It's always been in red meat for as long as we can consider, right? It's been in dairy products, it's been in milk and those kinds of things. And people weren't allergic to it before. So my question is, like, when did all this start? Well, the recorded cases that I could find date back to 2007, when a doctor by the name of Platt Mills discovered that in certain regions in the United States, people were taking this new cancer drug that contained alpha-gal, right? And now all of a sudden they were allergic to either the shot, right? They had some sort of crazy outbreak to the shot, and they were trying to figure out why they were allergic to the shot. Then they found out they were also allergic to red meat and these kinds of things, and they have decided that it is the Lone Star tick's fault. Right? Those that are getting bit by these Lone Star ticks, some people are getting this alpha-gal syndrome. The next obvious question I would have is why? Why are some people getting it and others not? Because it's kind of rare to me, or seems kind of weird to me, that people that have this or that get this, they don't, most of them that I know of anyway, they've not had it their whole life, right? They were eating cheeseburgers and steaks before and everything was fine. And now they get bit by a tick that contains the same things that their meat already had in them. And now it's making them sick all of a sudden. Like, the tick already had alpha-gal in it. In fact, whenever I read this just a little bit closer, what I was reading is what a lot of scientists think is that the ticks bite a deer. The deer has this alpha-gal in its bloodstream. Then the tick bites you, and that tick still has some of the deer blood in it, and now that deer blood kind of gets transferred to you. You get a little bit of that alpha-gal, and now you're having an allergic reaction to red meat. I find this kind of interesting because, like, I eat deer meat all the time. That is a huge food source in our family. And you can eat deer meat that's got alpha-gal in it and not become allergic to it. But if you get bit by this tick, all of a sudden you might get allergic to it. Not you will, but you might. So that makes me have some questions. Is like, how come? And once again, admittedly, this is just an opinion. I'm not saying this is fact. This may only be available on Rumble when we're done. I don't know. I'm not saying this is fact. But what I am saying is like something's causing that. So you ever heard of guilt by association? I wonder if something else in that tick isn't what is making an individual sick initially, and then alpha-gal, the carbohydrate, isn't considered guilty by association by our immune system. And now our immune system is attacking alpha-gal all the time because it recognizes that as part of the bad thing that made me sick before. Does that make sense, right? So by association now, anything that contains alpha-gal, our body's going to attack it with some sort of immune response, like a allergic reaction, breaking out in hives, and all those kinds of things. That's the only thing that makes sense to this old dumb backwooded hillbilly, right? And so if that's the case, then we have to consider, once again, not saying that is the case, but if it were to be the case, what other things contain alpha-gal, right? Contain this carbohydrate that might make people sick. Let me show you a list of that right here. And yes, after looking at that list, if you paid much attention, you will notice that Dohickeys, and if you're familiar with my videos, you know that what Dohickeys mean. If you don't know what Dohickeys mean, go back and look at the last clip I showed you closely. But Dohickeys apparently have alpha-gal in them by the other ingredients that are in them. And people that are allergic to alpha-gal now, if they get these Dohickeys, they may get an allergic reaction. I find this interesting. So then my next question is it possible that people that get a doohickey as a child, right? As a child, you get all kinds of doohickeys. Or at least some children do. Mine personally do not anymore. But children get a whole plethora of doohickeys when they are little. And those doohickeys have some sort of something in them that is supposed to teach their body to fight off that something. And if alpha-gal is included in that something, could our bodies be having an exaggerated immune response to the alpha-gal because, once again, it's guilty by association? Now, according to this 100-year-old study, proteins in doohickeys definitely can cause your body to start having an allergic response. Let me show you. So once again, according to that study, that's what's happening is your body looks at this protein and says everything's guilty that was in this thing that intruded into my body. Now, if that's the case, if our body's capable of doing that, if our body's capable of making things guilty by association, by saying, listen, this thing made me sick, here are all the particular ingredients of said thing, so anytime I get that particular ingredient, whatever it might be, then I'm going to have an immune response. Well, that would mean that everything in doohickeys might give us an immune response. So I went and looked. What other sort of things are in doohickeys? Well, there's egg proteins in doohickeys. And you know what else is on the rise? Egg allergies. Let me show you. Now, one of the things that got us to first start questioning doohickeys is fetal cell lines being used in doohickeys. So, I know what you may be thinking. Justin, are you saying we're allergic to humans? Or we might be allergic to humans or become allergic to humans? Well, not necessarily. But is it possible that if we if we take fetal cell lines and we put them into doohickeys, now it's just a carrier. It's not meant to be the reason for the doohickey. It's just a side ingredient, right? If it were a dinner with a steak and a baked potato and a salad, the fetal cell line's supposed to just be the salad, right? It's not the main course. But if our body makes it guilty by association, would that make miscarriages higher? Would that make women's bodies reject their fetuses, if you will, what they call them, their babies? Will it make their bodies reject that? Because it says, wait a minute, last time this happened to me, I had to have an immune response to get rid of it. And all the things aren't there, but that fetal is, and that fetal cell line is. And so let me attack that, because that caused me problems last time. Now, as I said in the first part of the video, I'm sure it is just a coincidence that this allergy is growing exponentially here in the United States and around the world, supposedly, I guess. I don't know, probably just here in the United States. I'm sure it's just coincidental that it is on the rise and going like crazy. At the same time, the UN comes out and says, hey, we are not in global warming, we're at global boiling. Around the same time, John Kerry just come out with his big long speech about how there needs to be a war even on agriculture, because agriculture is a third of the emission problems around the world causing global warming. And one of the things that he's very excited about, he said, was the reduction in methane. Now, whenever he's speaking of the reduction in methane as it pertains to agriculture, what he's talking about is the reduction of raising red meat for your table. Basically, when they say less methane, that equals kill your cows. Get rid of all the cows. That's what he's meaning. Now, from what I've understood and what I've read, there's not a cure for this red meat allergy. From what I was reading and studying, you just have to either not eat red meat or eat so little of it that your body does not have an immune response. You have to eat very little of it. I've been told, once again, by people that's had this, that they slowly reintroduced red meat and their body built up a tolerance and they were fine. Once again, I'm sure it's just a coincidence that it is on the rise. These are just the babblings of a backwood hillbilly. You take it with a grain of salt. But I would encourage you to learn how to ask questions. I would encourage you to spend some time asking questions like why and when did this start? And is this all a coincidence? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. However, it'd be awful handy, wouldn't it? I mean, think about it. If you want everybody to quit eating red meat, if you want everybody to slow the emissions because you think the world is about to boil over, which, by the way, I am a little over 30 years old, and my whole life, Florida and New York and everybody was supposed to be underwater in the next 5 to 10 years, and it still hasn't happened. And that was always the models predict that by the year 2000, everything's going to be underwater. And then it doesn't happen, which is kind of crazy. But, and people that are saying this, they buy oceanfront property, which makes a lot of sense. You know, I got an interesting thing about everything flooding. And you try this at home. It's a science experiment you can do at home. You take you a cup and you put water and ice in it, and you fill that thing plumb full. I'm talking where water will actually go just a little bit over the rim of a cup, right? It will just kind of dome over. You fill that thing full with ice water, and you watch that ice melt. You know what won't happen? It won't overflow when the ice melts. But anyhow, that's beside the point. Back onto this meat allergy. It'd be awful handy, right, if either there's a whole bunch of people allergic to red meat and can't eat it no more, so farmers don't have to raise as much red meat, which means they're going to go out of business, which means they're not going to be raising red meat and putting out the emissions and all of those things. There's going to be people scared to death to eat red meat because they're scared to death they might be allergic to it, and they might also be scared to death to go outside because they might get bit by this tick, right? It sure would be awful handy for a red meat allergy to get spread all around the world very quickly to reduce red meat consumption. It'd be awful handy for these UN global ideas, wouldn't it? Once again, I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll catch you on the next video.